Once again, good morning. Welcome back. Still Daybreak Africa, reaching you here from our studios in Ondo City. Of course, I'm Ezekiel Ogar. This morning we'll be dealing on democracy, rule of law, and a review of Nigeria's judicial system. And with us via Skype is Taiwo, Barrister Taiwo Adedeji, a legal practitioner, of course. Now, he has a degree in history, LLB, which is a degree in law, and also has master's degree in law, LLM, from the University of Lagos. He has served the Nigerian Bar Association, Ikeja branch at the committee level, and one-time secretary of the Continuing Legal Education Committee of the NBA Ikeja branch between 2004 and 2006. Welcome on Daybreak Africa, Taiwo.
Thank you very much.
It's so nice to have you. So let's start the conversation proper. Today we're taking a look at the rule of law. And of course, our focus is on the review of Nigeria's judicial system, as it were. Now, for true democracy, high quality democracy requires truly democratic rule of law to ensure political rights of any citizen. So I would want us to start by you telling us what you understand by democracy and rule of law.
Well, thank you very much. First and foremost, it's become what we can term maybe a national anthem by the very common and popular usage. The term democracy can always be defined even by any bystander on the street. To the extent of the general meaning, democracy, of course, refers to the government of the majority, where the majority decides as to who elects, who governs them. And of course, that is in itself becomes a very narrow meaning and narrow conception of democracy, because if it is about majority deciding who governs them, then majority should also be able to decide how they are governed, the system, the type of economic system in place, the policy framework. So democracy is an all-embracing concept. It is not just about people being relevant to the extent of being able to elect their leaders. It should be expanded. That is the broadest meaning of it. It should be expanded to mean that people should decide how they want to be governed, not just participating in the election of who governs them. So that is democracy. Then rule of law, which in itself can actually be linked to the concept of democracy, means that rule of law simply means supremacy of the law. That the law is supreme in any society, because the law, of course, refers to the set code, the rules, how the society should be governed. So that means democracy and the rule of law are interwoven. They are inseparable, because it is the law that is put in place by the democratic principle that will enable the rulers, properly so-called, to exercise the concept of the rule of law in making sure that the democracy works. So that is my very brief summation as to democracy and the rule of law.
So when it comes to judicial system in Nigeria, we all have our perspective, our sentiment, our bias. I think, Wanda, what's your thought as to the current state of judicial system in Nigeria?
Well, first and foremost, as a legal practitioner, as a stakeholder in the temple of justice, of course, every individual, whether you don't need to be a lawyer to be a stakeholder, every one of us is a stakeholder. But what I mean by when I use it in the context in which I also use it is that belonging to the legal profession, I always try to put myself in making a general passing comment on the state of the judiciary. And that is to the extent that I need to be very, very clear. Of course, the members of the judiciary, those who are regarded as the members, I mean the operator of the institution known as the judicial arm of government, of course, most of the time, they don't have this opportunity that we have to express our view in the public forum. They are limited to interpretation of the law. Vis-a-vis the court system, they don't have the advantage of making extra comment as to their decision. So to that extent, I always like to be fair to them. However, our judicial system is itself cannot be detached from the socio-economic system that we operate as a country. Of course, nothing has really changed significantly, except that maybe the judiciary of those days was manned by maybe people who were slightly different in terms of maybe cultural background, in terms of orientation than we have it today. A judiciary is a reflection of the society at large. So when people talk about rot in the judiciary, the judiciary is declining in value. It is to the extent that the Nigerian system is declining in value. And that is why I will also subscribe to the view that possibly the judicial system has been more controversial this day than it used to be. In the days of the masters, quote unquote, of the institution of judiciary, in the days of the Kayode Eshons of this world, the Okutas of this world, the Andrew Obasekis of this world, the judiciary then was not as controversial as it is now. Maybe because we now have many judges than we used to have. We now have, we have an expanded judicial institution that is now populated by different kinds of people with different orientation, different, even the mode of employment itself has to do totally different than it used to be, the mode of appointment. In those days, they used to beg people to come and be in the judiciary, but nowadays, even we find individual lobbying to become, to be appointed, intense lobbying for that matter. So all those things we have effect on the way the judicial system operates, the way it is perceived. But however, being very fair-minded, I will say the judiciary is a reflection of the society, and being fair to those white men on the bench, very many of them, the majority this time around, if I must call them, that's why I'm still going to call for the Nigerian judiciary a pass mark. I'm going to give them a pass mark, and that is my respective view.
Yeah, talking about the judiciary, a lot of people will not really agree to some of the things that you've said, while others will ascribe to your school of thought, as it were. But it is important for us to let Nigerians know, because when we started the show, you did give us a definition of democracy. And of course, you married same with the rule of law. And in talking about democratic rule or democracy, and of course, the rule of law, if we look at it through the eyes of the Nigerian, there is no way that we won't talk about the Nigerian judiciary because of some of the unusual or usual occurrences that has happened in that body. Without law, there is no tomorrow, a lot of people will say. I really want you to let Nigerians understand from your statement, taking us back to the fact that in the past, you can rightfully say that, the judiciary was as effective compared to today. I want to ask you what you think caused the shift. Why the sudden change where Nigerians can't really have so much credibility, believe in the credibility of the judiciary? If you rightly told us that in the past, you can beat your chest to say, yes, it was fully operational, it had so much credibility, but now, as a lawyer, you cannot really say 100% that that credibility still exists. What do you think caused the shift?
Yes, thank you very much. That's a very beautiful one. And my response to it is also going to be very obvious. The shift has been caused by what I term, I have said it earlier on, as judicial system, it's a reflection, it reflects the way we are in the society. However, I must also point that the shift has been caused by what I consider to be political incursion into the judicial system. We don't used to have it this way. Maybe in the current dispensation, before then there have been some kind of course, interregnum in our political system that we have military rule existing for a very long time, which has in a way distorted the system in Nigeria to the extent that even some of the judicial operators see themselves as an extension of the government in power. So, and that has come to be in our current system. What has created that shift then is that the over-politicization of the judiciary. Most of the time, even we as members of the society, we mount a lot of pressure on the operators, on the judicial officers. Nigeria is a very corrupt society, you must admit that. Because that corruption itself is not the cause of our problem. Corruption is just the effect of a general problem of the socio-economic formation that we operate, that has monetized a lot of things. The political system has made a kind of interference in the judicial system that today we don't have confidence in members of the judiciary as we used to have them. Of course, there are also exaggerations in the way things are painted. For instance, I was reading the interview of one of the judicial icons of those days who said, well, for every judgment you deliver, you make a friend and you make an enemy. To the person that the judgment favors, that person, you are the best person. You are the best thing to have ever happened to the rule of law. But to the person that the judgment is against, you are a worse character. In fact, you have been bribed by the opponent. That will be the conclusion. So that also in itself reflects the way we think when we make conclusion about the members of the judiciary, that when we are expecting them to deliver judgment in this, to reflect our political bias, and it doesn't go that way, we begin to castigate them. That is not to say that the system itself has not lent itself into political incursion, political interference by members of the by our politicians. Are you getting me? So so we have to just balance. I'm just trying to maintain a balanced position that the judicial system is what has created that shift is allowing politicians to dictate things and allowing them to misuse their power. And of course, the judiciary needs to be more upright, to be more effective and more assertive when it comes to making pronouncements, not minding the fact that you owe your appointment to, you are the mercy of one politician, one political office holder. We need more men of courage in the judicial system. So that is so what has been, like I said, what has created the shift has been the moment we allow politicians to dictate the way things are in the judicial system, especially in terms of appointment of judicial officers.
Now, you didn't fail to mention the issue of corruption, even in the system. And I think when it comes to effective justice in Nigeria, that is one part that has been very questionable. And I think to wonder, how can this system be strengthened to deliver a more effective justice?
Yeah, well, the system is strengthened if, for instance, I am aware that as at the time we came to the legal profession over 2 decades ago, judicial officers were poorly remunerated. So poorly remunerated that there is no way that it will be very difficult for an average person, except someone who has self-discipline, not to be tempted by politicians. I want a situation where judicial officers are more properly remunerated, and we don't leave their remuneration to the mercy of those who are in government. We talk about what has created the shift, and I believe that how the institution can be actually immune from corruption is to make sure that the whole appointment process is overhauled, is completely overhauled. We have to change the narrative from what it used to be. The situation where people will have to lobby politicians to be appointed as judicial officers have to be, in fact, totally discouraged. We have to create a situation where a kind of judicial autonomy, where the institution itself will appoint its best to the bench, not when one politician and one traditional ruler will be the one to submit the name of potential judges. So those are some of the things we can use to checkmate the incidents of corruption in the system. Of course, we have to also make sure that they are completely, of course, socially, there should be a kind of disconnection between politicians and judicial officers. So, of course, we cannot completely eradicate interference when it comes to, of course, we are all members of the civil society. We have our uncles, we have our aunties, we have our friends, we have our social background, we have our schoolmates. So some of those interference are rooted in the way our society is structured. So it all now belongs on the individual stakeholders in the judiciary. There should also be an institution to checkmate the tendencies that become apparently unbecoming of judicial officers. So if there are checkmates, then of course everybody will sit tight, because we cannot completely, we can't appoint judicial officers from the moon. They have to be appointed from the society. So to that extent, and since we are one way or the other connected with one another, it means that we will always be related. But there should be a red line that should not be crossed in terms of relationship. So, and those red lines have to be institutionally created by the operators of the system, we have bodies, we have Nigerian Judicial Council, those council that monitor the activities of judicial members. So this body, we have to live up to expectation of the Nigerian people in checkmating tendency to corruption.
Now, as one that is in the system, you are one person that is in the system, and we're talking about checkmating those who are supposed to checkmate those that need to be checkmated. Do I make sense? Yes. That's a tongue twister, right? Now corruption. Nigeria ranked 150 out of 180 countries in terms of corruption in 2022. According to Transparency International, that is their corruption perception index. Now, as one who is in the system, what are these checkmates? What are these red lines that shouldn't be crossed? How do you checkmate people in authority who are supposed to be the gatekeepers of law and order, rule of law? Those who are supposed to be the gatekeepers of the rules that are enshrined in democracy to ensure that everyone is carried along and everyone enjoy a country that they call their own. So in your own opinion, what are these checks that need to be done to ensure that politicians do not come in and rustle the water to the extent that credibility is totally lost? Okay, I've asked the question, but we need to go on a short break. When we return, our guest shall be giving us a perfect or near perfect answer. I don't know. It all depends on him. We'll take a short break. When we return, the discussion. Stay with us. Welcome back. If you just joined us, it is still Daybreak Africa. We are done with the first part of our interview today. We're moving on to the second segment, as it were. Before the short break, I did ask my guest to let us know, let us in on some of those checks that needs to be done in terms of corruption in the judiciary or the incursion of politicians in the judiciary, making Nigerians sleep with one eye and not having faith anymore in a system that's supposed to give us succor. So I want to ask, what are these checks or these red lines that must not be crossed so the judiciary can be put in its proper place?
Well, I was going to say the close monitoring of the judiciary officers. It is very important that the Nigerian Bar Association, which is the association of lawyers in Nigeria, we have to be more active in terms of monitoring. There used to be a private effort before in terms of close monitoring of the judiciary officer. I remember there used to be a magazine. I was even an associate editor of that magazine being published by my very able learned senior, Adedeji, former chairman, Nigerian Bar Association Ikeja branch. That was a private effort, but it would have been more effective if it was taken up by Nigerian Bar Association. What did that magazine used to do? We call it Squid Magazine in those days. What it used to do was to monitor the activities of judiciary officers as to when a judge starts in the morning, when the court will rise in the afternoon, how frequent a court sits, in order to ensure speedy dispensation of justice. Because when officers are left on their own to behave as if they are emperors, that they cannot be checkmated by anybody. Of course, the whole society, there will be anarchism. A session where a court will not sit for more than twice in a week, and each adjournment will take another 2 months. That will slow down the dispensation of justice. So if there are mechanisms put in place to make sure that judicial officers are up and doing in their duties, in their responsibilities to the society, then there won't be any cause for complaint. Of course, a judiciary cannot totally, like I said, satisfy or live up to the whims and caprices of everybody in terms of our very narrow and subjective view as to what a judiciary, what should be the outcome of judgments. Like I have seen a lot of Nigeria, particularly during the most recent political dispensation, where we wanted judgments to be interpreted in the way we see judgment. For example, the controversy around the section 134 of the 1999 Constitution on the status of FCT Abuja. To those to some people were of the opinion that they should just interpret it to mean that FCT had a special status over and superior, over and above other segments of the nation. Some people felt that, look, that cannot be. So it depends on the school of thought that you belong to. So to that extent, whatever the school of thought you belong to, you are expecting the judgment to be interpreted in a way that suits your narrow political viewpoint. Of course, a judiciary should live above this kind of narrow sentiment. So to that extent, they cannot satisfy everybody. I own up to that part. However, when it comes to dispensation of justice, in a way that will satisfy the maxim that justice must not only be done, but it must be seen to have been done, giving everybody right to fair hearing. By that, they will have satisfied their consciences. I mean, the operators of the system. With that, and also when you know that if you err, you can always be checkmated. In those days, I remember when reading some judgment of the Superior Court, Court of Appeal, Supreme Court, I've seen instances where some judges of the lower court were heavily castigated in judgment of committing, for instance, I remember one of the judgments of the Supreme Court that I read where the panel described a judge of the High Court, of the lower court, as committing judicial rascality. That was not a complimentary remark, so to say. So we need a reawakening in the system. We need more philosophers in the temple of justice. Those who are upright, those who are up and doing. When you know that, look, it doesn't end on your table. Whatever you do here is subject to superior scrutiny by your senior learned brothers at the higher bench. So most members of the judiciary will live up to expectation. They will sit tight. They won't be all this anarchism like we have it in Kano State, where they are giving different orders. Of course, to me, that is shameless. So we need a checkmate in the system. We need the National Judicial Council to be more proactive in the way they wield the big stick against erring judicial officers. So if that is done, I believe that, of course, we cannot determine when, except a judge is caught red-handed, we cannot determine by our own narrow view that, this judgment is a product of corruption. We speculate a lot, and of course, we know the institution will only live on evidence that is genuine, that is uncontroverted. That is the only way you can say, this judge here has been induced. This is a product of corruption. You cannot leave it. Some might just be reckless without necessarily having collected bribe.
You made mention some key factors I just can't help but actually look at once again. You made mention of the issue of speculation by the system. You made mention of a lack of independence, not just total independence, lack of independence itself. You made mention of the issue of delayed justice in Nigeria. If our judicial system is facing this sort of situation as we speak, how can we be confident in such a system knowing they are not independent, which means they probably may not exactly think on their own without certain infringements here and there, certain negotiations? And then the issue of extra delay of justice. You know, what sort of reforms could be necessary for to actually put that in order?
Okay. Well, first and foremost, let me address the simplest one has to do with the issue of delay in dispensation of justice. I believe that the best way to address that is to have, we need more hands. Our judiciary is under serious pressure because there are fewer hands to handle matters.
Is it the issue of fewer hands or fewer qualified hands?
Well, maybe I will be, I don't want to be too unequivocal to use the word fewer qualified hands, because that will sound judgmental. Those who have been privileged to have been appointed, I believe that they are qualified, especially in the reckoning of those who choose to appoint them. So to that extent, there is a presumption that a judge that is sitting in the bench is presumably learned, is presumably qualified. So I won't say someone is not qualified.
So are we working on the numbers?
Sir?
Are we working on numbers then?
Yes, in terms of number. Let me just put it this way. In terms of, I'm saying it in relation to the volume of cases that have been put in place. The numbers, for instance, in a place like Lagos, a judicial division like Lagos, we have, because of this population change, cases that are filed in relation to the number of judges. I'm telling you, the judges there are overworked, especially in Lagos, in terms of cases. That is why you have slow dispensation of justice. That is why you have a single case staying in court on a court docket for 10 years, because the system, we have fewer hands to man the system. That is to be realistic. However, I believe that the institutions should just make sure that they put up devices to get the best hands in the system. For instance, NBA should be more involved, should be more actively involved in recommending qualified hands. That is, Nigerian Bar Association should be involved. They should be widely consulted to recommend qualified hands to the bench. So that is with regards to the issue of speedy dispensation of justice. I think you said something else on, is it on qualification or something like that?
Speculations. Let me mention speculations.
Okay, speculation. Like we say, of course, you know, we cannot completely remove certain things. When people speculate as to what should be the likely outcome of the judgment, to me, that has to do with our person. Even in normal, to reduce it to a very simplistic analysis, in football, we have instances where, let's say, Arsenal is playing against Manchester United. It depends on if it is a narrow win, for instance, the members of the losing club will think that, oh, it's because the referee has been compromised. So sometimes it happens like that even in more serious contests, like in judiciary. I've seen people that their judgment, whenever they do, I know a colleague who are, whenever he loses a case, I used to say, a senior colleague for that matter, his viewpoint was that it's like the other side has reached out to the judge. That is why he lost that case. So, but that is not a progressive remark anyway. That is not a progressive speculation. When you think that it is only when judge favors you, that is when the judiciary is upright. So we cannot completely rule speculation, but the only thing is that things should be balanced and put in proper perspective.
Well, still on the table of speculation, I tend to wonder, many tend to believe, we tend to wonder if the system is really accountable to the people, and just how accessible is this system to the ordinary citizen on the streets.
Well, yes, accessibility, yes. Talking about accessibility this time around, then I will have to go a bit ideological.
Please do.
I have to go ideological. I don't subscribe to the capitalist socio-economic formation that we practice. Under the capitalist system, I'm telling you, justice is less accessible to the poor, and we have to come to terms with that reality. In those days, of course, that's why I must credit the effort of the likes of Chief Janipawemi of blessed memory, who made it possible for a lot of pro bono cases to be done. Nowadays, it is not like that, in spite of the fact that, in theory, there are institutions like Legal Aid Council that are put in place to provide free legal services for the poor. Of course, maybe they are, but those things are not enough. I know in Lagos State they have OPD, Office of the Public Defender. They have Citizen Mediation Right, Citizen Rights Council, something like that. Those are the institutions created to help those who lack access by the reason of their economic empowerment. They lack access. They don't have this stable access to the temple of justice. But those are not enough. So, and that is a reflection of a kind of socio-economic system we practice, where we have unequal distribution of wealth. That is why the rich man whose right has been trampled upon is likely to get justice than the poor man whose right has been trampled upon, because he can afford it. I'm not talking about bribery, I'm not talking about inducing with money. I'm talking about having access to the quality the justice delivery system. You have to file, you have to pay money to file, to make claims in the court. You have to engage the services of a very good lawyer. You need money to do this. But because people are not well empowered economically, there is no access. So I will say that has significantly hindered access to justice in Nigeria. And it is the reflection of our socio-economic system. We have a lot of inequality in the system. We have a lot of inequality in the way we do things. That is why a poor man will necessarily suffer greater rate of injustice than the son of a rich man will do.
In essence, you're saying we lack rule of law in Nigeria.
No, I'm not. Rule of law, what is, okay, like talking ideologically again now, what is the law that you are talking about? The law is a reflection of the mind of the ruling class. We have to come to that reality. It is a reflection of the mind of the ruling class. Of course, we have some conventional law, conventional practices that thou shalt not do that, which have their root in our jurisprudence, our ancient jurisprudence, that you cannot kill your fellow man, you cannot do this, you cannot do that. But even in that, you see all those things being trampled upon by the rich, by the powerful. So the rule of law, it depends what you mean by the rule of law. When it comes to law as it is, or law as it should be, law as it is, of course, we have it in Nigeria. We are being governed by the rule of law. But law as it ought to be, I'm telling you, this country likes it. And it did not start today, it has always been like that. Because that is what inequality has created.
Now, Taiwo, I really want to understand this. Democracy and rule of law needs the impact, requires the impact of the citizen of any nation for it to be executed. Then, judicial reform itself is an evolution or evolves from the tendency or the requirement to checkmate, like you rightly said, those in governance, those in government. My question is, as a Nigerian and as a lawyer, how has democracy and the rule of law impacted on judicial reform in the country? Taking a look from the past to the present, and of course, a review or a peek into the future, as it were. How has democracy and the rule of law, since it takes the citizens of a country to make it work, which is crucial, and of course, the fact that judicial reform itself is to take a glass look at those in power and their subordinates. How has that worked for us as a people from the past to the present?
We have fewer issues to deal with in terms of population, in terms of the people that are direct beneficiaries of or direct recipients of whatever is coming from the judiciary. However, now, in terms of growing population, we have more, the judicial system now has bigger tasks to deal with than it used to be. So that is why sometimes comparison it might be unfair to base comparison on the same indices. However, also, I know and I stand by my past statement that, see, it will be very difficult for those who are not privileged economically to access justice. And it is getting worse day by day. Even by the mode of appointment itself, we've seen instances where in one of the states, I won't mention the name of that state, I know of a guy who happens to be a senior colleague of mine in school. We were in the university together, and a senior colleague at the back. Brilliant, very upright guy, up and doing. But the first time he tried to become a judge, that was one of his ambitions. He wrote the exam. We learned that he came top, but because he had nobody, he's a son of nobody, he had no one to lobby for him, he was not appointed. Those who are inferior, those who score less in the scrutiny, those who score fewer marks than him, were appointed. And they, of course, took seniority over him. Of course, he was later appointed as a judge, maybe 2 or 3 years after he was initially denied. But he was denied in that first instance, not because he was not qualified. He was denied because he was a son of nobody, quote and unquote, in terms of privilege. So those who have privileged background will always dictate the case. So to the extent that appointment to judicial offices are based on people's background in terms of the son of whom you are, the daughter of whom you are, that in itself will create a kind of debilitating effect on the justice delivery system. That is not to say the children of the privileged. We've seen instances, we've seen children of privilege who got to the bench and performed wonderfully well. So I'm not making a judgment here, but I'm talking in terms of denial, in terms of access to quality justice delivery system, that people should not be denied because of their background. What is source for the goods is source for the gander. So that mode of appointment should be particularly overall, should be so the extent that the politicians will play lesser role. They have lesser role to play in determining who comes to the judiciary, and that will reflect in the future of the justice delivery system. Of course, we used to have it in a way in the past. Now it is getting worse, but it can only get worse if checks are not put in place to make sure that judges are not appointed on the whims and caprices of political office holders. So that is just my very brief recommendation. We cannot exhaust discussion in a very simple interview.
Obviously, there's plenty left unsaid. And we're obviously out of time already.
Yes. So we are out of time. I know for real, for sure, that we're going to call you again so we can continue, because I have lots of questions. We barely scratched the surface. And I know Ezekiel too has a lot of questions to ask. But for that reason, we're going to have a part 2 of this discussion, because there's still so much to talk about. So we appreciate you for being on the show today, as we look forward to having you once again.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. It's my pleasure.
So that's the show for today, ladies and gentlemen. From the other side, we have to let you know that we're definitely going to have a part 2 of the discussion on democracy and rule of law, taking a review at the judicial system. My name is Anire Binitie. Thanks for watching the show this morning. Stay safe and be good.
And I am Ezekiel Ogar.